Welcome to the Quintessential Real Estate Podcast. In today's episode, we are talking with Chris Nelson of Gemstone Real Estate. And today we're going to talk about a couple different things, but more importantly, just the communities in the local area, in Chester and Montgomery County, and what makes them thrive, what makes them, palatable to the homeowner. So thanks for coming on, Chris. Give us just a quick, brief overview of who you are, and we'll get started.
Awesome. First and foremost, thanks for having me back. This is episode 2 that we've done together. So as you mentioned, Chris Nelson out of right now I'm in the Lansdale, North Wales area, born and raised here in Montgomery County. I have been in the real estate space for about 22 to 23 years at this point. And father of 4, married to my wife for 10 years. So that's pretty much the bird's eye view of who I am.
Awesome. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is you make a lot of awesome content. You seem really plugged into the community that you're in. And so I thought it would be great to have you on and talk about the communities. So let's talk about, I was thinking we talk about Lansdale, Collegeville, Norristown, and Pottstown. What makes them different? What makes, the fact that Phoenixville is just, leaping off the map as far as everybody wants to be there. They want to be in the borough versus like Pottstown in the last 5 years, like we talked offline, just it's definitely getting there, but it's not quite there. And then you've got Lansdale, similar situation, and the different infrastructures of all of those.
Yeah. Well, Quinn, it starts with the infrastructure, right? I think people nowadays want to live in a community where it's walkable, right? Mm-hmm. Years ago, there really, unless you lived in the city, right? There really weren't many communities that were walkable. And even if you apply that to today, right? Like in the Philadelphia area, you hear things like Northern Liberties and Queen Village, very walkable communities that thrive. And we're starting to see that come back to certain areas, some of the ones you mentioned here in Montgomery County, right? So to kind of compare and contrast, so I actually am from Norristown. I graduated from Norristown, and I've seen Norristown go through a lot of different transitions. I own real estate in Pottstown. As a child, my father was a hot rodder. So if you know anything about Pottstown's a huge car community. High Street was 2 lanes each way, and we would cruise, right? And then same thing for Lansdale. Lansdale always had cruise nights. They would go to the car show, then we would end up on Main Street, and we'd get something to eat and hang out. We'd hang out with our friends or my parents' friends, whatever. And that died. And I don't know the rhyme or reason for why that died, right? But where I'm going with that is the infrastructure was there where you could entertain yourself. You could get together with others who have similar interest. And then in a central location, go and get something to eat, go get something to drink, go do other things that were entertaining, right? So to kind of fast forward, right? As I mentioned, Pottstown kind of died off. But if you look at the infrastructure, if you look at High Street's a long, narrow street that has businesses on both sides, real big brownstone and huge 3-story buildings. A lot of them went vacant for quite some time. But if you look at what happened over the last couple of years, it looks as though, and the same thing applies with Lansdale, it appears that the local government came together and saw a need to play nice in the sandbox with the small business owners, right? Small business owners usually love their community, and they do what they do because they love their community, and it's not because they're there to make a ton of money. Most of these small business owners don't make a ton of money. So when local government makes it challenging for them, and I'm going to use my words carefully here, but from what I'm seeing going on in the last couple of years in Norristown, it doesn't seem like the local government's playing nice with some of these small business owners, which is why you have a lot of vacancy along Main Street. To add context, Norristown is the county seat for Montgomery County. It's where the courthouse is. It's where SEPTA, the public transportation system, has several hubs. So that in itself, you would say, well, if it's the county seat and it has this infrastructure and this public transportation system, Why does it not thrive? So that's where I feel as though local government and infrastructure are step one.
What would you say, just to piggyback off of that, the small business owners and county, why would they not play nice if the idea would be to, obviously, you want growth, you want people to come in, you want to raise your tax base, that type of thing. What would be the motivation? Or maybe it's not even motivation, it's like just not motivated to do that.
I wish I had an answer to that. To be honest, I don't have a solid answer to that. And I honestly think that some of the people who are put in these positions honestly don't know what they're doing. And I say that, we can all learn, a skill set, but I don't think there's a rhyme or a reason, right? Like at the end of the day, you look at these streets and you see that there's vacancy. And as you mentioned, the people in these seats, their objective should be to fill those vacancies and to create a situation where there's going to be people paying those taxes. There's going to be people generating revenue. There's going to be people creating tax off of sales, right? And it doesn't happen. So logically, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
It seems so, it seems like it's just common sense.
You raise a great point, though, with Norristown, just the fact that it's connected the railway back into Philadelphia. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why Lansdale has done so well is we're seeing that migration out of Philadelphia. And people are still saying, like, I still want to go to Fishtown, Northern Liberties, Center City. This is my way to kind of live in the suburbs, but still not have to drive and, weather 76 to get in there. So I'm going to take the train. And Lansdale's great, and Norristown has that, but then Phoenixville doesn't even have that.
Yeah.
Phoenixville's unique. And Phoenixville and Pottstown, I think, are kind of similar. Well, they have the ability to put that in, and there's always different rumors of it happening, but it always blows you away because those are just huge points to why people want to live where they live, because they're commuters.
Yeah, absolutely. The crazy thing about Pottstown is, although SEPTA does run through Pottstown, I think it pretty much ends there. There's no regional line. They have the bus route. The regional line, I believe, is what you were alluding to as far as part of conversation that's supposed to expand up there. But Pottstown has Take Part. Yeah. Right? Their own private bus system. Right? So it's pretty interesting where they have that baked in there as well, and it's been there for quite some time. But you're right. They're very similar in that regard. I think what Phoenixville did well, and they identified it early on, is they said we need to bring the art to this community, right? And if you go down into Phoenixville, as soon as you travel into Phoenixville, pretty much from either direction, you're welcomed by art, right? Right on the side of Bluebird's Distillery, which unfortunately part of it got covered up now with their addition, which is a beautiful addition, but it was a huge memorial that welcomed you to Phoenixville, right? So I think they started there, right? And they said, let's welcome the artist into the community. And what I mean by artist is, I'm not saying that they colored on the walls and all of a sudden people said, hey, let's go hang out there, right? What I mean though is that they said, let's bring in the people who have that artistic approach. And by doing that, all of a sudden then the breweries and the local musicians started to get together, and you started to see these little, for lack of a better term, festivals. Right, Phoenixville will shut their street down to kind of create that festival feeling, almost on a weekly basis during the summer. And if you look at what happened in Lansdale, Backyard Beans, they have a mural. The mural was painted by someone local, and they did the same thing right across from Backyard Beans. You have Round Guys Brewing. They got together. They shut that street down. They would almost create that little festival feeling. There were people that would come and play music, and there were people who would come have beer and just enjoy their community. And I think that's what allowed for other shops to say, there's opportunity. If this is what's going on, I would love to be part of that opportunity. I mean, think about where your office is structured at. I mean, technically, we're in the business of real estate. We're very hyper local people. Your office is structured right across the street from a coffee shop, right? Like that. There's something that comes from especially from a place of business, where you see a town that's active, and you say, I want to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what started to happen in a lot of these different areas. Like I said, Lansdale, you had several different breweries come in. Buddy and Julie did a really phenomenal job. They opened up Lansdale Tavern, which has been a brick and mortar for years, but they turned it around and they brought the community in. Again, they brought the artist in. They put murals on their walls in their businesses, and they really created this sense of camaraderie, right? And you see that they have the Main Street Bike Show, they have the Lansdale Car Show. Pottstown throughout the year has several car shows with hundreds of people that come from all over. Phoenixville, if I'm not mistaken, also has a car show. But again, if they don't do a car show, they're doing other things that are appealing to the people who appreciate the art, right? So starts with the infrastructure. Need government to support the fact that small businesses need to have the ability to thrive in their own community, right? So play nice with the local businesses. And then the local businesses almost form like their own committee, if you will. And
definitely.
That's what I've seen.
And they advocate for one another.
Yes.
I mean, there's 2 points to this. I think about Boyertown and I think about the main drag, but I also think about Pottstown, the main drag. And we talk about business owners and you're saying like they genuinely care about their community and it's not all about the money. They just want to bring a good, whatever their restaurant, brewery, anything. I know multiple owners in Boyertown that own multiple businesses. Yeah. Same with Pottstown. And that's a trend for like people pulling together and trying to build this area up, and that is just, I think of, there's a great case of a guy in Spring City during COVID. He started up his own comedy area, Soul Joel's. Yeah. And he set up this huge tent and he was having it during COVID, having out big people like Jim Brew and whatnot. And then he bought Gadsby's in Pottstown, which is amazing because I don't know, Gadsby's must have been, great. I think I had my prom there at Sunnybrook, which was what it was called. And it was just like this old place. And now this person just decided, I'm going to bring in live entertainment and do things. And he does other stuff with the community. And it's so cool to see. And that brings in, hey, we're going to go to a comedy show. And then, all right, what is on High Street? Where can I go? Can I go to Blue Elephant? Can I go to JJ Radigan's? And that is just, that it all starts there. Yeah. It's like food. After I'm done my 9 to 5, what can I do here? And when people are deciding where they want to live, like we live just outside of basically Phoenixville and Pottstown. So we can go to both. And like we wanted to be just outside of it because I wanted a little bit more land. But some people are like, I want to be like, I'll be talking with people in the borough of Phoenixville. Like it has to say borough or I won't buy it. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's fine.
It's funny you say that. I literally was on a phone call yesterday with a girl I've known for 10 plus years. We were reminiscing. Long story short, she lives in the borough and they're ready to buy. And that's exactly what she said. She said, I'm part of this community. She said, I would consider moving to another location. But the more and more I had that conversation with her, I could tell that consideration was marginal at best. You can't even,
I don't know what, I had a girl we just finished up a transaction with, and she's from Conshohocken, and we were, we kind of looked in Phoenixville, we looked in Lansdale, and we looked in Media, and, Conshohocken as well. Now, Conshohocken is definitely a higher price point, and, we kept coming back. I'm like, hey, this is close to what you're looking for. Do you want to live in Phoenixville? And I'm like, I go on the weekends, figure it out. Do you really want to be involved in this community? Go to Lansdale. And at the end of the day, she's just like, Quinn, you know what? I don't mind making a concession for the type of home that I buy, but I want to stay in the community that I'm in because of all that is there. And I mean, that's powerful because it's just not, and we come talking about home ownership, but it's like, it's not just like what the home is where the home is.
It's sense of community. Like years ago, we got so far away from having a sense of community, right? And this is somewhat off topic, but it's like, at one point in my life, I lived with my grandmother in Germantown for a couple of years. And there was a real sense of community. Like I knew the neighbors by name at a young age. I knew the person who ran the corner store by name. They knew me by name. They knew who my grandmother was. And that was a sense of community. And then when I moved, as I mentioned, to the Norristown area, there was no sense of community. Like I remember, and till like still to this day, like you can feel it in some communities. People will walk out their door and not even acknowledge their neighbor. Like not even acknowledge their neighbor, right? There's communities where people don't love their community enough to sweep in front of their own front porch, right? And you don't see that in Phoenixville. You don't see that in Lansdale, you know? So you're right. It's not necessarily the home itself. It's definitely where the home is. And when there's a sense of community, people invest into that.
Mm-hmm. The sense of community has also been kind of lost with the last like 3 years of what's going on. Yeah. And, you know, I even take it from a, you know, perspective of like churches. If you look at, they all went online and now they're having trouble getting people to come back. And it's so hard. It's like, if you want to grow in your faith or if you want to grow your community, it's like, you need to come out and put in your own time. And people say, oh, I don't like this community. And honestly, you need to challenge people and just say, look, if you have an issue with this, you don't run away. You say, what can I do to help? Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there on those Pottstown, Phoenixville groups saying, this is a crap area. I cannot believe all this stuff happens. Then more people pile on. And it's like, well, what are you doing? It's like, there's a little bit of there's a homeless issue in Pottstown right now. And you just see people all over Facebook just trying to like give their like 2 cents. And it's like, but there are people out there trying to solve the problem. And I think it just comes back to, it's like, if you want your community to grow, like you have to be a part of it. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on to talk about the areas that you love so much, because I see you on social media, you know, you're talking with these business owners and trying to promote them, because I look at it as, you know, a real estate professional is talking with a lot of these small business owners, and it's like, how can we help you?
Exactly. Verbatim. When I set out with my camera to have conversations or to highlight a business, it's my sole purpose is to bring attention and do my best to help them. A lot of the times, these small businesses, they're not marketers. They don't know how to get their word out. So if I can be a patron, especially to a business in my own community, like, and when I say community, I mean Montgomery County, right?
Yeah.
Like I travel and highlight businesses all throughout Montgomery County. Maybe a little more of an emphasis of where I live because of convenience. Mm-hmm. But if I can provide value in that regard, because I feel as though it's something that God gave me that talent to do, that's part of my purpose, and I'm all in for stuff like that.
I mean, we'll link to your stuff because I think people need to go. You've got a page. It's Go Mont Go.
Yeah, it's go. Yeah. Go _Mont _co PA.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I've went to a few of the places just after seeing like your video. I'm like, oh, we're definitely going to. What's the one place that you did in Spring City? I think they have 2 locations. It's Mexican. El Volcan?
El Volcan.
Yeah. I remember seeing that. I'm like, oh, I messaged you. I'm like, we're going to this. You know, we're checking it out.
I have to send this podcast episode to Freddie. Freddie's the owner of El Volcan. Real good friend of ours.
Yeah, just like right off of 724. I'm like, where are we going? Where are we going to pull in? And I'm like, oh, this is the Mexican joint I want. Yeah, and it's like some of the Pottstown places are kind of slipping, and I'm like, let's go up this way and check that out. I
highlighted some Pottstown. I think JJ Radican was in there. As a matter of fact, you mentioned the Blue Elephant. So I highlighted them a long time ago, and Nextdoor actually picked up that publication and re-syndicated it, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Blue Elephant's pretty neat because it was originally a bank. Yeah. So they've got these like 20-foot ceilings. I mean, it's an awesome Asian fusion. I mean, their apps are amazing. They do a brunch on Sundays. Yeah. It's really cool. I always tell people, I'm like, it almost doesn't make sense where it is, but that just makes it so much better.
It's a hidden gem.
It's a hidden gem.
It's not very hidden because it's on the corner. Yeah. It's a huge building.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we live in the Lansdale area. Where are the best places to go? You know, we talked about a lot of these different areas. Yeah. I heard Round Guys. I heard what was the coffee shop?
Backyard Beans.
Okay.
So you can actually get Backyard Beans. Their business has been quite impressive to watch. You can buy their coffee on the shelves locally, like your local Giant, your local major box grocery stores. Their coffee's on the shelf. But Backyard Beans, Shout out to Matt, really good guy. To answer your question, oh man, some of the best places. So I would say that you have to visit. You have to visit Lansdale Tavern. Buddy and Julie really turned that place around. I mean, I remember driving past that place as a kid. Yeah. It was just not the place to go. But they've turned it around. Food's good. Beer's always good. And they make you feel like family there. Wasabi is a place that just opened up right across the street from the Montgomeryville Mall. So kind of Lansdale, Montgomeryville area. They're a sushi place. Really, really good. Prices on point. And let's see. I would say... Gosh, there's so many. Well, I would say Well Crafted. If you're going to come into the area, Well Crafted is a brewery right off of Main Street. They have food. You can bring food from any of the local establishments. So if you want to walk over to Round Guys and bring some of their sexy fries over. Dude, speaking of which. Okay.
There we go.
Do yourself a favor and visit Round Guys and try the sexy fries. There's 3 locations that offer them. Butcher and Barkeep in Harleysville, Northbound in Solderton, and now the Round House, which is the restaurant portion of Round Guys in Lansdale. I would almost put money on it that they would be in like your top 5 fries ever.
Top 5 fries?
Top 5 fries ever.
What do they do to them?
I'm going to let the suspense build.
All right. Hey, and a recommendation by you goes a long way. I mean, I love this part because it's just like we get to go around because we have a non-conventional schedule, and it's like we get to pop into different places. I mean, I think this one time we met up at where are we going? Conshohocken. The wing spot.
Boathouse.
Boathouse.
Yes.
I've won so many different types of beers, but these wings were to die for.
Okay,
I mean, they were banging.
Now, this is my love language. So the last 2 plugs for places to visit. You mentioned one, Boathouse. If you love wings, you have to try the Boathouse. Family-owned place. Amazing. And then Union Jack's in Glenside. Mm-hmm. My wife and I go there every Sunday. So if you ever are, if you don't have anything to do on a Sunday around lunchtime, come check us out, have a beer with us, and try some of their wings. Guaranteed, best wings you'll have in Montgomery County.
All right, we'll do one more, and then we'll get into some other real estate stuff here.
Yeah.
So, best recommendation, I guess, from the arts. Live music, something along those lines in those small communities.
Yeah, so Solderton. If you're in Solderton, the theater there, and this gentleman has put out some amazing theatrical plays. I forget some of the big name talent that has come through there that, they're actual actors and actresses now. But if you want something along those lines where it's entertainment, I would definitely say this out at the
Broad Theater.
That's it. Yes,
yeah.
Which is on Broad Street, which would make a lot of sense, which connects to Northbound. Aside from that, if you like plays, there also is another theater right in Norristown. I forget the name of that theater as well. But they not only do they do a lot of auditions there, but they do theatrical plays as well. I mentioned Well Crafted. Well Crafted brings in a lot of live talent over the weekend, and they're actually set up to have a pretty decent sound system. So those are 3 places I would say if you want to go and have some type of entertainment. And you mentioned Soul Joe's. So Soul Joe's, comedy is an art, right? Kind of goes back to what I was saying about you bring the artist in, and usually when you say art, you think of somebody with an easel and like a paintbrush. Those comedians are artists. Buddy, partner of Lansdale Tavern, actually is a comedian and was actually on stage at Soul Joe's. He knows a lot of those guys.
Oh, that's awesome.
So probably the number 1 place in all of Montgomery County for entertainment, I'm going to give to Soul Joe's.
I've been to Soul Joe's a couple times, once in the one location and one in the other, and it's just great. And the owner's super cool. Yep. He's just like this bro, just getting people on.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy because he almost at one point was in Chester County, because if he was on the other side of the water,
yeah,
he would have been in Chester County. So interesting.
And he gets big names too. Like I said, Jim Brewer. I mean, he's gotten a few.
Dude, they definitely bring in some big names.
And Philly is pretty big for comedy too.
Yes.
So the fact that we're getting some in the suburbs is nice.
Yes. Well, I mean, Kevin Hart, right? One of the biggest names out there for comedy. But if you take a step back, there's a lot of big names like Chris Rock. Come to find out, there's a lot of smaller clubs like Helium and stuff where he would test his content, right? So Philly is definitely on the map when it comes to comedy, without a doubt.
All right, so we're gonna switch gears here. We're gonna talk to Chris, not the restaurant enthusiast, beer enthusiast, but Chris, the REO specialist. Yeah. And houses have gotten a lot more expensive. The forbearance period is ending or over or going to be ending. People are talking about a possible market crash. Not everybody. Delinquencies are up. Foreclosures, maybe, are they up? Kind of give us an idea from that part of the market and how that is really affecting just the regular retail.
Yeah. So crash, right? Crash is a buzzword, right? If you ask people to define what they mean by market crash, they really can't answer that question, right? And I also question, like, do some people selfishly want a market crash, right? But either way, so to answer your question, one hat that I do wear is I've specialized in REO and foreclosure, however you want to kind of relate to that, over the last 12 years, because it impacted me on a personal level. So I watch it very closely, and I feel as though, depending on how you want to frame this conversation, almost with any, I mean, this kind of is a political conversation, but at the end of the day, you can frame the data however you want, right?
Sure.
But here's my take on it. So you'll read articles where it says, "Watch out, foreclosures are coming." Mm-hmm. They're not.
Really? Come on, all these headlines say they're coming.
They're not, right?
Why?
There's different parts of a foreclosure. A foreclosure is a process to take property back. Okay. So you get people who like to watch stats, right? So as soon as foreclosure starts, pick up, right? And I'll explain what that is in a minute. People will say, "Oh, geez, everybody's about to lose their house." That's really not the case, right? So a foreclosure start is this. It's Quinn's not feeling well and has to have a surgery, and Quinn can't work for 90 days. Well, Quinn still needs to eat. So instead of paying his mortgage, he decides to pay his light bill, decides to put food on the table. And 3 months goes by, and Quinn hasn't made a mortgage payment. Now, all of a sudden, the mortgage company says, "Quinn, you got to pay me. If you don't pay me, you have to go." Well, one more month goes by, and Quinn just isn't able to make that payment. Well, now Quinn's property is it's in foreclosure. There's a foreclosure start. Well, that's literally just a stage that they categorize your mortgage because of the fact it's not being paid. That does not in any way, shape, or form mean that Quinn's delinquent loan is going to be foreclosed on. All right. So let's apply that to today's market. Quinn didn't buy his house last year. Quinn didn't buy his house the year before. Quinn's owned his home for about 5 years. Quinn's got this thing called equity, right? And over the last few years, we've seen so much appreciation where even some people who bought their home a year or 2 years ago, depending the market, very well could have enough equity to get them out of a distressed situation. So the reason I say that I don't think we're going to see foreclosures in scale is because, number one, the foreclosure starts are low, but it's easy for me to say they're up 50% in comparison to last year. Well, in the last 2 years, foreclosure filings really weren't happening. There was more money being given out for obvious reasons, and the stats were down, right? But if you take a look compare the stats for 2023 for pre-foreclosure and compare that to 2018 or even 2019, and 2019 is the last year we conducted real estate from January 1st to December 31st without interruption. If you compare those stats, foreclosures are marginal right now, even the starts. So again, it's easy for people to grab that data and say, "Watch out, the tsunami's coming," because there are foreclosure starts. Yes, there are foreclosure starts for many reasons. I mean, auto loan debt is at the highest it's ever been. Credit card debt is at the highest it's ever been. There's so much. Students have to repay, student loans. Forbearances have come to an end. There are some people who are feeling financial pressure, and some of those people aren't going to pay their mortgage, but they're going to have options. That's where you and I can come in and say, "Hey, Quinn, Chris, you're having a hardship. How can we help you avoid a foreclosure?" And I think that at the end of the day is what we're going to see throughout 2024 and even into 2025. We're going to see foreclosures starts happen, and then people say, I got to do something. I'm not going to lose this equity. Mm-hmm. I spoke with a lady last month. She said a $1.2 million property. House is in foreclosure. She's got $600,000 in equity. And she just needed someone to talk to her and say,
just lay it out.
Just lay it out. Mm-hmm. You got a couple options. You can put your head in the sand. I know you love your home. I do too. It's nice. Put your head in your sand and think that everything's going to fix itself. Some people do that. But it's not the majority. But as a liaison and someone who was able to come in and not want her to go into foreclosure, I said, sell this property, tap into that $600,000 equity, go bury your toes in the sand somewhere nice and warm in Florida. That's exactly what she's doing. So you can frame the conversation, but I don't think we're going to see a ton of foreclosures hit the market. And real quick context, over the next few months, you may see more foreclosures hit the market, but that's backlogged inventory from properties that got pigeonholed when the court shut down.
Yeah, it's all context, and the headlines don't have context. They never do.
They're not designed to. Mm-hmm. Clickbait. That's how they make their money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I always tell people, you got to talk to a professional in whatever industry you're going to do something in, especially in the one that it costs the most to do anything in.
Absolutely.
And, so, okay, so that makes sense. So we've got a lot of equity. If there's a hardship, there are ways out of it. Mm-hmm. What I think about is real estate is the most, valuable asset you have, but we got to look at the whole pie. We talk about auto loans being, I think they're over $800 a month for average right now. And the average car is over $50,000, not student debt, credit card debt. It's looking like it's going to hit 1.3 trillion.
Yeah. Last I
it's like 1.2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think now we also have this really interesting evil product in my eyes that it's not technically a credit card because it doesn't have more than 4 payments, and those are the buy now, pay laters. And those are becoming increasingly more prevalent. And I forget what the percentage, but Black Friday, that period of time, there was like a couple billion, used for that. And I think they did and basically, so what buy now, pay later is, for people who don't know, don't use them, is you'll probably see it on Amazon like, hey, just make 4 payments. And what they do is the first payment is actually a down payment, so they can get around the fact that it's 4 payments. That makes it a credit card. So they're not credit card companies. They're this other type of payment system. So free interest over the first 4 payments. So make the payment, down payment, then one more. After that point, we're seeing interest rates. I mean, they're over 30%. Yeah. And but I see that, and they interviewed these people and said, if this wasn't available to you, this product, would you have bought it? And it is like staggeringly low, the amount of people who would have bought it. It's like, yeah, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have bought it. And, I look at all that, hey, that's a Q1 issue. Yeah. Like, so we could have some interesting delinquencies, and that, like, you buy a couch for $3,000 and 30%. I mean, it's going to get expensive really quick. So I look at that, look at the credit card debt, look at the auto loans, and people are just going to start just making decisions about their finances and what they can and can't pay. Yep. So we're going to need to sell our real estate to get ourselves out of this mess. So Chris, I mean, it sounds like everybody's going to start selling their houses to access this equity. And if everybody starts running at the same time, we could have a crash. And now again, I'm not saying I believe this, but there's a lot of different, and also real estate is local too. I always point back to the fact, I tell people, I'm like, look, we're buying in Montgomery, Chester County, where fintech, pharmaceuticals, we're talking about where there's a lot of jobs. Now, maybe, there's areas in the United States where it doesn't happen, or does happen. It's like you have to take it from a local perspective. So when I kind of say all that, what's your response?
So there's one thing you mentioned I want to just go back to real quick, and it's about the 4 payments. For years, people have been programmed to take advantage of convenience. Right? Mm-hmm. That's exactly why 7-Eleven exists. It's exactly why Wawa exists, and you spend more money there for the same product that you would spend if you just went to your grocery store.
2 for $3. I'm getting a deal.
Exactly. It's funny because as soon as I saw this water when I walked in, I had just posted this on my story yesterday because I had just bought this yesterday, and I said, put it in a blue bottle, call it something cool, and you got me.
Come on now. Hawaiian volcanic.
Yeah.
We got electrolytes in here. It's deep well water. Dude, what does that mean? I'm buying it.
It tastes just like the water that comes out of my refrigerator.
It's Poland Springs.
But it's working. So we pay for convenience. When you look at, Amazon and all, like right now, convenience has been magnified or multiplied in comparison to when you and I grew up. Convenience was getting something from the 7-Eleven, right? Now convenience is, hey, I can hit a button and it can be here in a few hours, maybe at worst case scenario tomorrow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And when you give people an opportunity to say, hey, you can't afford it right now, we'll put you in a position where you think you can afford it, that just makes it that much worse. You mentioned crash. I still don't think those factors lead to a crash, right? Because most people, as long as they have the financial ability, won't sell their property. They're going to refinance. We're already seeing that. So it's crazy because people are like, these golden handcuffs of 2-3%
yeah.
interest rates. Totally get it. A lot of those people aren't selling their home. That's fine. They're not going to sell their home, but they're refinancing.
Yeah.
They're refinancing out of those because they're like, well, we have this 2% interest rate and we save money, but our credit cards are at 27%, 28%.
Exactly.
Our car payment, we decided to finance it for 7 years. And like, well, why don't we refinance the bricks and sticks we own at 8% and pay down all that debt? At the end of the day, that makes a logical decision. So now
you're probably reducing your payments overall. You got to look at your debt as a whole pot, whole pie.
So now that they've gotten away from that 2%, 3% interest and they've refinanced into a 7 or 8%, now 2 years down the road, those golden handcuffs don't exist, right? So I think it's going to be a slow trickle when it comes to those people putting their property on the market, because I do think right now it is a financial vehicle for them to solve a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And technically real estate has been that for a lot of people for a lot of years. People have used their primary home to put their kids through college, right? Or to help their kids buy another property, right? So it's always been a vehicle to solve another financial problem. Or even it's your way to build equity to go into retirement, right? It's always solved a problem. But I don't think even with the piling debt that we're going to see a crash. There's too much demand for housing right now for there to be a crash in the next couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, really the only way, like right now, the amount of buyers for the inventory in these two counties we're talking about, it's like maybe a month. Maybe.
So right now, I can tell you.
Bring me in.
Right now we are at 1.7 months of inventory in Montgomery County. I just posted this yesterday. So for those who don't know what that means, is that based off of the rate of activity within this market or any market, if a new listing was not introduced to the market, it would take us roughly 1.7 months to exhaust every available home based on demand. Yeah. Okay. So what's crazy, to kind of make sense of this, is that 7 or 8 months ago, we were at less than 1%, or less than 1 month, 1 month of inventory, okay? A normal market, this is where people are kind of like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
A normal market where it's fair for both buyer and seller, there's somewhere around 5 months of inventory, 4, 5, maybe 6 months of inventory, depending where you're at. Usually once you get to 6 months of inventory, it's more of a buyer's market. Once you get below 4 months of inventory, it becomes a seller's market. So there's that sweet spot. So the fact that we're below 2
yep.
tells you.
And have been below 2.
Have been below 2. We would almost need to double, if not a little bit more than that, to kind of just even out the playing field.
Yeah. On top of that, the one thing that they say, hey, prices always go up when money gets more expensive because people are like, oh my gosh, what if it keeps going up, right? So on the other side of the coin, we're seeing rates drop. So we're seeing more and more just communication that, hey, we're going to cut rates. And today is, December 15th. But in the coming year, they're going to drop rates. Consumers are going to see, I'm dropping rates. I'm not going to buy. I'm going to watch rates drop. So that's another thing that is kind of pressing on this type of market. You know, do you think that could be an indicator for just people, waiting?
The crazy thing about rates, and I'm gonna use my words carefully, but I honestly don't care about the rate, right? I'm an investor.
Yeah.
Right. If the deal makes sense, I'll take your 13% interest on your money all day.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take your 14%. I don't care. If the deal at the end of the day makes sense, if the numbers make sense, I'm playing ball.
Yeah.
Everybody's worried about the interest rate, but no one cares about what they're paying for the product.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, we've been so hyper-focused on it because they were just saying, hey, money's so cheap. Like, you need to buy. And now people aren't analyzing properties at the actual value because getting back to convenience, the generation that is getting into the buying is basically, this is what I make, and these are all my monthly, dinged expenses, Netflix, Walmart, Chipotle, Grubhub. I can afford X amount of payment rather than just, hey, let's look at the asset and say, is this something, am I buying it correctly? And, will this appreciate over time?
Yep. Front end and back end debt, right? So the Netflix and all that stuff, that's your front end debt. Your back end debt, the things that are in your credit report, right? Those are the things that people look at, like whether I can or cannot afford. And yes, you need to look at those things. I'm not saying you don't, but what I'm saying is, for me being in the world of default and foreclosure, to add context, I almost lost my house back in 2008. So I know that feeling, and I'm like, okay, bad decisions made, don't make them again. So if you apply that logic and we start to talk about sale price versus interest and which you want to focus on, let's just say I'm willing to give you a loan. Interest is super cheap, 2%. Your payments are going to be affordable for you. But you, because of that, go and spend $350,000 on a house that's being listed for $300,000, and your lender decides we're going to waive that appraisal because that's the type of market we're in. So you just pay $350,000 for a house that's worth $300,000. Remember that scenario about Quinn being sick, not being able to work? In this scenario, Quinn has no equity.
Mm-hmm. Quinn might have only put 3% down because the money was so cheap.
So you're 3% down on that $350,000 property. What are we talking, 10 grand? 10, 12, somewhere. So you have no equity. And the 10,000 you put down, I mean, you could dice the numbers up and it's really doesn't play out this way, but just for easy numbers, at $350,000 property, you've leveraged for $340,000, but it's still only worth $300,000. Your super cheap interest is great, but if you can't afford that mortgage, you don't have the options that I just explained earlier in this segment. Mm-hmm. That's where my concern comes in. People are so focused on, like, yes, if you like the product being the house, and you can afford, I dice all this stuff up and I say, Quinn, you can have that house and here's the payment. Can you afford it? And you say, yes, we're good. The fact that it's 11% that makes that work, in my opinion, is irrelevant. You're going to be able to change those numbers down the road. But what you can't change is the value of that property in real time, right?
Yeah.
So you're setting yourself up for disaster, or a lot of people, in my opinion, especially over the last year, have set themselves up for disaster by focusing on the interest and not the sale price. Because the interest was so attractive and the mortgage payment was going to be so cheap, in their mind, they said, great, let's pay more for the product than it's ever going to be worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see plenty of people, covering appraisal gap differences and whatnot. And also another thing that I tell people when you do that, it's like, look, you're going to have to hang out in this house now for 8 to 10 years if you want to get that back. Like, that's just the reality of it. And hey, you know what? If it does really, solve the problem that you need, like that's a real conversation to have.
Correct.
So real estate, obviously, it's all nuanced. There's different circumstances, different situations. It's funny you say that about the interest and the equity and whatnot. And we were just looking at buying this commercial property, this free span commercial light industrial building, and we were doing our due diligence. We actually were able to get seller financing at a great rate. And part of the deal was the fact that he was willing to hold it for 36 months at a certain amount. And But we did our due diligence. We had a commercial appraiser come in, and the money that they viewed it for, third party, viewed it well under what the guy wanted to sell it for. And my concern was, it's like trying not to get wrapped up in the rate, because look, this is a long-term play. This is real estate. So in 3 years, if this property is not worth what I want to buy it for, how am I going to convince a bank in 3 years to, and for context, I'm borrowing money in the short term from other people. I need it to appraise in 3 years to get my money back, or I'm going to have to load in another 100. Yeah. And it's like doing your due diligence on that scale makes total sense, but really same thing for buying your first house or buying your second house. And I think just having financial literacy, you know, working with people who have that type of intel for this, you know, even like the debt restructure you talk about, like, hey, it's not the end of the world. Like you might have to sell your house to, you know, get rid of this, or, hey, that flashy 2% rate, like it's probably got to become 7%. But guess what? The $40,000 you racked up in credit card debt, it's gone. It's now at 7%, you know, and that's all just really valuable. And that's the type of conversations, because we're on this crazy just spending culture. And eventually that has to stop. You know, people need to.
I mean, do you really think that that's going to happen?
No, I don't. And here's the thing, and I've said this to some people. It's like, what do you think is going to happen when someone is not having this conversation but has credit cards? They're going to look at it 1 month and say, honey, I don't think we're paying this back. I've still got 50 grand in credit card that I can do. Let's just run it up, file bankruptcy. I think that the lion's share of people are going to end up doing that.
It happens more often than you would think.
Yeah.
More often. I mean, again, it goes back to conditioning. I talked about how people are conditioned for convenience. Mm-hmm. Think about your childhood. Did any of your friends ever tell you a story about how they purchased $50,000 worth of products by mistake on their parents' credit card?
No.
Never once.
No.
None of my friends.
None of that.
Once. But you could turn on the news and so-and-so's child, by playing with an iPad, purchased. If that doesn't show you that we're that even the youngest of the consumers are programmed to hit that button, I don't know. Like that's just so toxic. Mm-hmm. Like my 4-year-old knows that Amazon comes more than once a day. Like my 4-year-old is more excited over Amazon than he is Santa. Why? Because Santa comes once.
That's good. But all right. So all that to say, so you don't think there's going to be in our markets a drop?
No. There are a few markets that, you know, outside of Pennsylvania that I think are going to see some
because of the high equity gain they saw. I mean, it has to, you know, level off a little bit, but you're not going to lose all the equity gain in the last 24 months, right?
Well, that and Exodus, right? Some people made some decisions based off of, hey, I'm going to be working from my pajamas forever. Mm-hmm. And they made some decisions, and now their company's like, you got to come back. And they're like, well, we sold that house. And like, so, you know, there's a lot of different things like that going on. So if you look at what's going on in like, out in like San Francisco. I know Austin right now is a hot market for default. There is, well, again, they're not here in our backyard, but there are several pockets where the writing's on the wall. Mm-hmm. But and for what it's worth, I mean, hopefully people pay attention and remember this podcast. Keep in mind that you're going to grab or see a publication that the headline is bold and jarring and punches you in the gut, but it doesn't apply to anything here.
Yeah.
Foreclosures are up. Mm-hmm. And when you read it in the 5th paragraph in the last sentence, but this applies to San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah. And then, you know what? It's kind of interesting too. If we want to, hey, San Francisco Bay Area, comparing it to like Lansdale, Pottstown, whatever, it matters what's going on in that community right now. And there are reasons why people leave areas. Just like you said, like Lansdale slipped at one point, Pottstown slipped at one point. Now they're building it back. It's like people always go with what is happening in these communities. So again, if you're buying into a community, invest in your community. Yeah. Go to, Round Guys, go to Soul Joel's, see who's there that night, go grab a beer with friends, grab some coffee from a local guy, not Starbucks. There are just ways that like invest in your community, and you'll bring the entire community up. You'll all make money. You'll all be happy with it. So I think that's a great way to end this podcast. Thanks again for coming on, Chris. Where can we find you, just so everybody can check out all these great plates, beers, everything like that?
So 610 Monopoly is my personal Instagram. It's not as exciting, but the hyper local stuff is Go Montco PA. Each one of them, there's an underscore in between. So Go _ Mont _ Go. We'll plug it in the show notes.
Yes, we will.
To make it easy for you. And aside from that, I'm on pretty much all social platforms just under my name, Chris Nelson.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.